This is 7th Generation Warfare, and I am your current host, John Nelson. In this episode, we'll be continuing to look at MCDP 1 Warfighting. We are still in Chapter 1, The Nature of War, and we will be looking in this episode at fluidity. In previous episodes, we looked at uncertainty, we looked at friction, and we defined what warfare is. So if you have not seen those, you could go back and watch them. I recommend you go back and watch them. I'm not going to tell you. You have to go back and watch them. Because I care about your will. Alright, fluidity. Like friction and uncertainty, fluidity is an inherent attribute of war. Each episode in war is the temporary result of a unique combination of circumstances presenting a unique set of problems and requiring an original solution. Nevertheless, no episode can be viewed in isolation. Rather, each episode emerges with those that precede and follow it, shaped by the former and shaping the conditions of the latter, creating a continuous, fluctuating flow of activity replete with fleeting opportunities and unforeseen events. Since war is a fluid phenomenon, its conduct requires flexibility of thought. Its conduct requires flexibility of thought. Success depends, in large part, on the ability to adapt, to proactively shape changing events to our advantage, as well as to react quickly and constantly changing conditions. So if you remember in a previous episode, I told you that, for purposes of applying MCDP 1 to 6th and 7th generation warfare, anytime I read the word war, you could just apply the word life to it. And that will get us a lot closer to what the nature of 6th and 7th generation warfare are. So, fluidity is an inherent attribute of war. And when he's talking about episodes, he's talking about, whatever you want to define as an episode. It could be an hour, it could be a day, it could be a whole period in your life, childhood, college years, young adulthood, or for 7th generation warfare, an episode could be an entire person's lifetime. We could be talking about one generation, the next generation, and they're all going to be shaped by the former, and they're going to shape the latter. So if we're looking at 7th generation warfare, my life was shaped by the decisions my parents made. They were not 7th generation warfare fighters. They didn't have the concept. But nonetheless, the decisions they made affected me. And so we're on to a new episode. And the decisions I make as a 7th generation warfare fighter are going to affect my child. And he could be another episode, or they could be another episode. I hope to have many children. And so you could view episodes like that. There is no real definition of what constitutes an episode. So you can scale up and scale back your view. Are you focusing on the, and we'll get into this a little bit later, are you focusing on the tactical, the day-to-day efforts, or are you focusing on the strategic, much bigger scale decisions? And you can define what a episode is based on what you're currently focusing on, what problem you're trying to solve. All right, continuing on. It is physically impossible to sustain a high tempo of activity indefinitely, although clearly there will be times when it is advantageous to push men and equipment to the limit. The tempo of war will fluctuate from periods of intense combat to periods in which activity is limited to information gathering, replenishment, redeployment. Darkness and weather can influence the tempo of war, but need not halt it. A competitive rhythm will develop between the opposing wills, with each belligerent trying to influence and exploit the tempo and the continuous flow of events to suit their purposes. So, I recently made a post on my Ready Side Up Facebook group. If you are on Facebook, please go over to Ready Side Up, Not Quite Prepping, Survival, or Homesteading. And the post was about personal boom bust cycles. You can search for it, search boom bust, and how we applied the economic principle of boom and bust to our own personal life. And that's kind of the same thing here. Is you're going to be able to ramp up, and you're going to be able to exert to push men and equipment, push yourself and your resources to your limit, to even go beyond what is sustainable. But there will be a downside, and so predicting what that downside will look like, or what advantages you might give to the enemy on the downside, is something you also have to take into account. But you can certainly go to that boom, just beware of the bust. But no, it's natural. It starts off by saying it is physically impossible to sustain high tempo activity indefinitely. So in a 7th generation war, certainly there are certain criterias that need to be had when your children are very young, like below the age of 3 and developing, and they're going to require a lot of attention from you because they can't do anything from themselves. So that is a very high tempo time, and so maybe you focus a little bit more on family during that time, and then you focus more on economic growth and other things once your kids are old enough to start taking care of themselves a little bit. So knowing where to exert your effort and how much tempo or activity is required is something you'll have to figure out. Military forces will mass to concentrate combat power against the enemy. However, this massing will also make them vulnerable to the effects of enemy fires, and they will find it necessary to disperse. Another competitive rhythm will develop: disperse, concentrate, disperse again, as each belligerent tries to concentrate combat power temporarily while limiting their vulnerability to enemy combating fire. So there'll be this ebb and flow of forces on the battlefield. They're trying to concentrate so that they can hit you hard, but as they concentrate, they make themselves vulnerable to more concentrated fire. So the fire you put upon them will be more effective the closer they are. So in order to and that goes back to risk, which we talked about previously. The risk of concentrating your forces. It could be down to the squad level. If you were walking through the woods and all of you are clumped together, a machine gun could just go and take you all out. So you want to disperse, spread out so that you're not susceptible to that fire. But how well are you going to be able to concentrate your fire on one specific enemy if that's the case? And that goes all the way up to the strategic level as well, that you might need to concentrate battalions or divisions even in one spot to have a real effect on the overall outcome of the war. And like in 7th generation warfare, where we're talking about balancing your efforts, there's going to be a downside to where you put your effort. So the more you focus on the readiness, the ready side up aspect of that I've coined in in how to fight a 7th generation warfare. If you're in that more of a prepper mentality, you might be too focused on disastrous outcomes that could befall you, and you're not looking at being a productive leader, giving hope and inspiration to your family. So that is a way that you are then vulnerable by concentrating your effort. So as you fight your 7th generation warfare, you got to have this overall framework of things you want to try and accomplish and things you want to pass to your children, and the framework of the means of how you're going to do it. And you got to be willing to ebb and flow through them. You can't force yourself, and this I think anyone who really has gone through a 6th generation warfare effectively knows that you can't just. Sometimes you will require to force your will into accomplishing something, seeing something to the end, but by and large, you're not a machine, and don't treat yourself like a machine. So if you're not feeling a certain effort, it's not clicking with you, you're probably going to be wasting effort by trying to see it through to completion, or forcing yourself to accomplish something when your heart or your mind is not in it. Move your heart and mind to where they can be most effective in fighting the little battles, to have the greatest impact. So, and I have so many efforts going on right now, between work and family, and working on house, and helping my brother with the house he just bought, and all kinds of stuff going on this channel. So just being fluid, kind of having a sense of how much effort I want to devote to each, but it not being a strict percentage, and just knowing that all these things are of interest to me, and I will allot time, but not necessarily on a strict schedule. Some people love schedules, and if you can do schedules, do it. My point is not to have a schedule, but to know that you can be fluid. If you are the type of person that keeps a schedule, just know that you have to be okay with your schedule breaking, because there is going to be uncertainty that disrupts your plans, aka your schedule. So that is all MCDP1 talks about on fluidity. It's a shorter section, and next episode we'll be talking about disorder, which should be a good one. So please like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you on the next one.